The Imposter Bride, a Dangerous Deception. Chapter 4. The Wolf's Den. Blackthorn Castle rose from the mist like something born of nightmares and fairy tales combined. Unlike Ravencrest's golden stone and soaring spires, this fortress was built of dark granite that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Massive walls stretched towards storm clouds, broken by towers that clawed at the sky like grasping fingers. Even the banners that flew from the battlements, silver wolves on midnight black, seemed to snap with predatory hunger. Leora pressed closer to the carriage window, her breath fogging the glass as they approached the gatehouse. The portcullis was a mouth of iron teeth, and the guards who watched their approach moved with the precise discipline of soldiers who'd seen real war. Everything about this place spoke of power held through strength rather than birthright. Impressive, isn't it? Prince Alaric's voice held unmistakable pride. My great-grandfather built these walls to withstand any siege. The stone was quarried from the Thornwood Mountains. They say it's harder than steel and twice as unforgiving. She turned to find him watching her reaction with those calculating eyes. It's formidable, my lord. Formidable. Another diplomatic word. His mouth curved in what might have been amusement. Most visitors find it rather intimidating, but then most visitors aren't expecting to call it home. The carriage passed beneath the portcullis with a hollow rumble of wheels on stone. The courtyard beyond was vast enough to hold an army, surrounded by buildings that served both practical and defensive purposes. Stables, armory, barracks, all built with the same dark stone and grim efficiency. Servants hurried across the space with purpose, their breath visible in the frigid air. But it was the great hall that dominated everything else. Built into the castle's heart, it rose like a cathedral of war, its windows glowing with warm light that promised sanctuary or trap, depending on one's perspective. Gargoyles leered from the corners of the roof, their stone faces worn smooth by centuries of mountain winds. "Welcome to Blackthorn," Prince Alaric said as footmen hurried to open the carriage door. "Your new home, dear wife." Sir Caspian appeared at the carriage steps before the footman could assist her, his hand extended in offer of aid. His fingers were cold from the ride, but steady as they helped her down onto the cobblestones. When she looked up to thank him, she found his green eyes studying her face with concern rather than calculation. "The journey wasn't too arduous, I hope, Your Highness." His voice carried genuine warmth, so different from her husband's measured tones. "Mountain roads can be treacherous this time of year." "No more than expected, Sir Caspian," she replied, surprised by how easily his name came to her lips, "though I confess the castle is rather imposing." Something flickered in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, or sympathy. "It grows on you," he said quietly. "The walls may be stern, but they protect what lies within. And what lies within?" He glanced toward Prince Alaric, who was speaking with the captain of the guard. "Well, there's more warmth here than the stones would suggest." Before she could ask what he meant, Prince Alaric rejoined them. His gaze moved between her and his advisor with an unreadable expression, but when he spoke, his voice was pleasant enough. "Cass, see that our belongings are taken to the appropriate chambers. I'll show my bride to her new home personally." He offered Leora his arm with courtly grace. "Come, love, there are people eager to meet you." The Great Hall's interior was a revelation. Where the exterior promised harsh functionality, the inside spoke of wealth and refinement accumulated over generations. Tapestries depicting wolves and winter forest covered the stone walls, their rich black and silvers warming the space. A fire large enough to roast an ox crackled in the massive hearth, casting dancing shadows across polished armor and ancestral portraits. But it was the people gathered to greet her that made Leora's breath catch. Unlike the formal court at Ravencrest, this assembly felt more like a family. If families included battle-scarred knights and sharp-eyed advisors, they watched her approach with curiosity rather than judgment, and when Prince Alaric began the introductions, their responses were genuine rather than ceremonial. "My chamberlain, Sir Marcus," the prince said, indicating a graying man whose kind eyes crinkled with smile lines. "He's run this castle since before I could walk and knows where every secret passage leads." Sir Marcus bowed deeply but warmly. "Your Highness honors us with your presence. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." "And this fierce creature is Dame Lyanna, our master at arms." The woman who stepped forward was perhaps 40, with steel gray hair and scars that spoke of battles won through skill rather than luck. But her smile was surprisingly gentle as she inclined her head. "Your Highness, I understand you're newly come from a more refined court. If you find our ways too rough, I hope you'll have patience with us." "Dame Leanna trains all our knights," Prince Alaric added, and there was unmistakable respect in his voice. "She could best most men half her age and has on numerous occasions." One by one, he introduced her to the inner circle that helped govern Blackthorn. Each person was accomplished in their own right, yet their loyalty to their prince was absolute. It was almost like watching a pack of wolves, different strengths, different roles, but united in their devotion to their alpha. "And of course, you've met Caspian," Prince Alaric concluded as his advisor rejoined them. "My right hand, my sword arm, and the man I trust above all others." Sir Caspian's response was a slight bow and a smile that reached his eyes. "The honor is mine, Your Highness, both in service to my prince and in welcoming you to our family." Family. The word hit her unexpectedly. Looking around at these faces, worn by weather and war, but alive with intelligence and purpose, she began to understand what Sir Caspian had meant about warmth within stern walls. This wasn't the polished court she'd known at Ravencrest, all ceremony and hidden daggers. This was something rawer, but perhaps more honest. "You must be exhausted," Prince Alaric said, his hand settling at the small of her back with possessive familiarity. "Let me show you to your chambers. We can tour the rest tomorrow." He guided her up a sweeping staircase whose banisters were carved with running wolves. The corridor beyond was lined with portraits of previous rulers, men and women with the same storm-colored eyes and determined jawlines. All of them looked capable of great cruelty or great mercy, depending on their mood. "Your rooms," Prince Alaric said, opening a heavy oak door. "I trust you'll find them adequate." Adequate was a gross understatement. The chamber beyond was easily twice the size of her room at Ravencrest, dominated by a canopied bed that could sleep 6 people comfortably. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming tapestries that depicted silver wolves running beneath stars. Windows looked out over the castle's gardens, where snow had transformed bare branches into crystalline sculptures. But it was the connecting door that made her pulse quicken with apprehension. "My chambers are through there," Prince Alaric said, following her gaze. "For convenience, you understand. We are, after all, newly wed." The threat in those words was subtle but unmistakable. She was his wife now, in name and law, if not yet in fact. And he had made it clear that he expected all the privileges that position entailed. "Of course, my lord," she managed, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell leather and winter storms, and something darker underneath. When he reached up to trace the line of her jaw with one finger, she had to force herself not to flinch away. "You're trembling," he observed. "From cold or from something else?" Terror, guilt, the weight of deception that grows heavier with every lie. But she couldn't say any of that. Instead, she lifted her chin with what she hoped looked like dignity rather than defiance. "It has been a long day, my lord. Perhaps overwhelming." Overwhelming. He seemed to taste the word, his thumb brushing across her lower lip with deliberate slowness. "Yes, I imagine it has been. New husband, new home, new life. So many changes for a sheltered princess." There was mockery in his tone, subtle but unmistakable, as if he were testing how far he could push before she broke character entirely. "I'm stronger than I appear, my lord," she said quietly. "Are you?" His hand slid down to rest against her throat, fingers spanning her neck with deliberate intimacy. She could feel her pulse hammering against his palm, betraying her fear despite her brave words. How strong, I wonder? Strong enough to bear the weight of truth? Or perhaps the weight of lies? Her breath caught. But before she could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Prince Alaric's expression shifted to annoyance as he called out permission to enter. Sir Caspian appeared in the doorway, his green eyes taking in the scene with swift assessment. If he noticed the prince's possessive hold on her throat or her barely controlled terror, he gave no sign. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness. There's an urgent message from the eastern border. Raiders have been spotted near Thornwick." Prince Alaric's attention shifted immediately to military matters, his hand dropping from her neck. "How many? What manner of force? Perhaps 30 men, mounted and well-armed. They struck a merchant caravan and disappeared into the Wolfwood before our patrols could respond. Sir Caspian's voice was crisp and professional, but his eyes flicked briefly to Leora with something that might have been concern. Dame Lyanna requests permission to lead a hunting party at first light. Granted, and have the border garrisons doubled their watch rotations. Prince Alaric was already moving toward his chambers, the predator responding to the scent of prey. We'll discuss strategy in the war room. Send word to... He paused at the connecting door, looking back at Leora with an expression she couldn't quite read. Rest well tonight, dear wife. Tomorrow you can begin learning the ways of your new home. And I... His smile was sharp as winter wind. I can begin learning yours. The door closed behind him with quiet finality, leaving her alone with the crackling fire and her racing thoughts. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her wedding gown pooling around her like spilled cream, and tried to slow her breathing. He suspects. He knows something's wrong, even if he doesn't know what. How long before suspicion becomes certainty? How long before another soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts? This time, it was Sir Caspian who appeared when she called permission to enter. He carried a tray that held wine, bread, and what looked like her personal belongings from the carriage. I thought you might be hungry, he said simply. Wedding feasts rarely allow the bride to eat properly. He set the tray on a small table near the fire, then turned to face her with that same gentle concern she'd noticed earlier. Are you well, Your Highness? You look pale. There was something in his voice, kindness without calculation, warmth without agenda. That made her throat tighten unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had shown her simple human concern? I'm adjusting, she said carefully. It's all rather different from Ravencrest. Different, yes, but not necessarily worse. He moved to the windows, checking the latches with unconscious thoroughness. Blackthorn takes some getting used to, I'll grant you. We're less formal here, more direct in our dealings. Some find it refreshing after the intrigues of more sophisticated courts. Sophisticated. If only he knew how unsophisticated her background truly was. And you, Sir Caspian? Do you find it refreshing? He paused in his inspection of the windows, turning to study her with those perceptive green eyes. I've served Prince Alaric for 8 years, Your Highness. I've seen him in battle and in council, in victory and defeat. He's the finest man I've ever known. Honorable, just, fiercely protective of those under his care. A slight smile curved his lips. Though I understand he can be intense for those who don't know him well. Intense. That was certainly one word for a man who threatened to flay people alive and spoke of the price of betrayal with such casual certainty. He seems very focused, she said diplomatically. He's learned to be. When you're responsible for thousands of lives, when enemies circle like wolves looking for weakness, focus becomes a matter of survival. Sir Caspian moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and steel and something cleaner, soap perhaps, or mountain air. But beneath that focus is a man capable of great loyalty, great love. The right woman could find herself very happy here. There was something in his tone that made her look up sharply. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Hope, perhaps, or assessment of a different kind than his prince's calculating stare. The right woman, she repeated softly. Someone strong enough to stand beside him rather than behind him. Someone who could see past the reputation to the man underneath. His voice dropped, becoming almost intimate. Someone who could give him what he's never had, a partner rather than a possession. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning she wasn't sure she understood. Was he speaking generally, or was there something more personal in his assessment? And you think I might be that woman? The question slipped out before she could stop it, vulnerable in a way that made her immediately want to call it back. Sir Caspian was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the firelight. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but certain. I think you're not what you appear to be, Your Highness. Whether that's better or worse than what you're supposed to be. He shrugged slightly. Well, I suppose we'll find out, won't we? Her blood turned to ice. He knows. Oh God, he knows. and he's going to tell the prince, but instead of accusation or threat, his expression remained kind, almost understanding. "Everyone has secrets," he said quietly. "Everyone has parts of themselves they'd rather keep hidden. The question isn't whether you have them, it's what you choose to do with them." Before she could respond, he moved toward the door. "Sleep well, Your Highness. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but you won't face them alone. Whatever else may come, you have friends here, whether you know it or not." The door closed softly behind him, leaving her staring at the space where he'd stood. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but not entirely from fear. There had been something in his voice, in the way he'd looked at her, that spoke of possibilities she didn't dare examine too closely. Friends. The word seemed impossible in this place of stone walls and predatory princes, but as she changed from her wedding gown into a night rail of silk, so fine it seemed woven from moonbeams, she found herself thinking of green eyes that held warmth instead of calculation. Outside her windows, snow continued to fall over Blackthorn Castle, blanketing the fortress in silence. Somewhere in the castle, Prince Alaric was planning strategy against raiders, his mind focused on matters of war and politics. And somewhere else, Sir Caspian was... what? Thinking of their conversation, wondering about the secrets she carried? "Stop," she told herself as she slipped between sheets that smelled of lavender and winter air. "You're married to a dangerous man who already suspects you're not what you seem. The last thing you need is to complicate matters by thinking about his loyal knight." But as sleep finally claimed her, it wasn't her husband's storm-colored eyes that followed her into dreams. Instead, she found herself remembering the way Sir Caspian had said her title, not with the formality of court, but with something that sounded almost like affection. "Whatever else may come, you have friends here." In a castle built of secrets and stone, surrounded by wolves both literal and metaphorical, the promise of friendship felt more precious than any crown jewel, even if she could never dare to claim it.